1 week season.
Hello, friends and Inner Circle fam. Happy Election Day here in the United States. So usually we reserve this time for roster reviews with me, but this week we're going to change it up. We're going to do a first look for week 10, and we're going to discuss the player pool process. So for those of you who sent rosters for review, I will provide some feedback individually in DMs in the Discord. But for the rest of you, we're going to hop in here and kind of talk through the process for me each week and kind of do a first look. So for me, every week, I kind of start my process by opening up the DK app on my phone. I go game by game, position by position, kind of noting my initial thoughts. We're not going to do that completely live on screen here, but you can find my game by game thoughts pinned in Discord, as well as posted on Twitter probably later today. But let's hop in and go game by game. I'll kind of walk you through my process, my thoughts, and then we'll look at the player pool, how I go through that process each week. So the first game on the DK app is the Patriots at the Bears. And so just kind of starting here at the running back position, I'm looking, I see DeAndre Swift. He's got 17 or more opportunities in every game, kind of dating back to week 2. And the Patriots, they've been gashed by running backs the past 6 weeks, allowing 118 and 2 touchdowns to Tank Bigsby, 132 and 2 touchdowns to Joe Mixon, 154 yards to Tony Pollard, 160 yards and a touchdown to Jordan Mason, 184 yards to the combination of like Mostert and Wright, and then 121 yards and a touchdown to the combination of Breece Hall and Braylon Allen. So we'll definitely have interest in Swift in this matchup at home. Looking at it on paper here, looks like a good matchup for Kalen Williams, but Chicago's really struggled to put up points when they haven't been facing Carolina or Jacksonville, who have been 2 of the worst defenses this season. The Bears are an above average defense, so I'm not sure I'm going to be drawn to Caleb Williams here. As it relates to running backs outside of DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith-Njigba back in week 2, no other wide receiver has eclipsed 20 DK points against New England this season. So again, kind of a spot that's not standing out to me for the Bears wide receivers. On the Patriots side of the ball, Drake May and Hunter Henry stand out as a potential cheap stack. They only cost $9,700, and they've combined for fantasy outputs of 38 points, 35.6 points, and 31.3 DK points in Drake May's 3 healthy games this year. So if looking to save salary, I think that's a combination that I would consider. Moving to the next game, which is the Bills at the Colts. Initially to me, this stands out as a really strong spot for Josh Allen, as the Colts have allowed Caleb Williams, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, CJ Stroud, and Sam Darnold all to pass for at least 285 yards against them, only holding Tyler Huntley, Will Levis, and Malik Willis in check in their games this season. So I think this is a really strong spot for Josh Allen. The matchup is also above average for James Cook on the ground. However, he's going to likely have to get there on efficiency, as he's only seen over 15 touches twice in his past 7 games. Dalton Kincaid has seen his involvement increase. I think he had 10 targets last week. And so that would make 6 straight games with at least 6 targets. Kind of looking at the tight end position against the Colts. Several tight ends have already kind of put up really strong games against Indy. Probably most notably Cole Kmet, who went for 10 catches for 97 yards and a touchdown, as well as Jonnu Smith, who went 7 for 96 and a touchdown already this season. So, to me, Kincaid kind of stands out here at 4,900. If we get Amari Cooper to return back from his wrist injury, I think he'd be an intriguing option here as well. And then kind of considering the other side of the ball, I think this is a really strong spot as well for Jonathan Taylor. We've seen some really strong games against the Bills this year. And in terms of pass catchers, Josh Downs would be my favorite Colt, specifically if Joe Flacco were to start again. If it's Richardson, it's probably just Jonathan Taylor for me in this game for the Colts. Moving on to the Vikings at the Jaguars. So the Jaguars have given up the overall quarterback one on the week 3 times already this season. So I think that kind of stat alone has me interested in Sam Darnold. Through the air, both like elite wide receivers they've faced this season have absolutely torched the Jaguars. So like Tyreek Hill went for 130 and a touchdown, and Nico Collins went for 151 and a touchdown. So I'm going to exclude A.J. Brown. I would consider him an elite wide receiver. However, he was injured in the first half of yesterday's Monday Night Football game. And so he was off to a good start, but, only played just over a quarter of the game. So for me, it's kind of fire up Justin Jefferson here. He's expensive at $8,800, but in a really great spot here. So along with Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson kind of catches my eye here at 4,700. Jags have allowed double-digit fantasy producers at tight end in over half their games. Hawkinson played his first game last week after, being out for, a year almost. Saw 4 targets, limited snaps. He's kind of being eased back into a full-time role, but I do like him here, certainly as part of potential double stacks. On the other side of the ball, matchup doesn't really stand out on the ground for either Jag, ETN or Bigsby. However, Evan Ingram has seen 30 targets since his return from injury 4 weeks ago. Should continue to be the focal point of the offense with Christian Kirk out for the year. Gabe Davis still dealing with a shoulder injury. I think at kind of a pay down salary saver, I am interested here in Parker Washington at sub 4K. Did see involvement in the offense last week. And I think if I'm going to build some stacks or things potentially around the Bills, Washington and Ingram are intriguing to me. So the next game on the slate is the Broncos at the Chiefs. So I don't know, I think when I think of these teams, like my very first thought is just like 2 strong defenses. So, last week, Lamar Jackson became the first quarterback to surpass 240 yards passing against the Broncos. So I think kind of coupled with that, the fact that Mahomes hasn't hit 20 fantasy points yet this season, like he's kind of completely off my radar at 6,600. On the ground, the matchup's kind of middling for Kareem Hunt. He's seeing strong usage. No running back, I think, has put up 4x their salary score against Denver this season. They've faced Henry and Kamara, J.K. Dobbins, Breece Hall, Najee Harris, Hubbard, and Kenneth Walker already. So they've faced a strong row of running backs. None of them have put up a really strong tournament score. So probably pass on Kareem Hunt. I think last night he had his longest run of the season of like 15 yards. So not the explosive back that he used to be. No real pieces kind of standing out from this game on either side of the ball outside of potentially DeAndre Hopkins. He's 5,300. He's got several weeks now to learn the playbook. Had heavy involvement last night. I think 80 or 90 yards and 2 touchdowns. Obviously, pricing for the slate came out on Monday. Had it come out today, I suspect DeAndre Hopkins would have been probably at least 1,000 more after last night's performance. So he's likely going to garner some ownership here just due to the fact that he's underpriced. It is a tough matchup, but he's somebody who, catches my eye here on a first pass. Moving forward, the next game here is the Falcons at the Saints. Kirk Cousins struggled the first time these 2 teams met. But the Saints they've allowed Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Baker Mayfield and Justin Herbert all to amass 300 total yards. And Cousins continues to look stronger and stronger each week. So I think he's going to continue to be interesting to me here, as well as the Falcons passing attack. So Drake London, he exited the Dallas game last week with a hip pointer. So if he's inactive, my interest in Darnell Mooney is going to be really high. If he is active, I think I'll probably have some interest in London and Mooney. And then on the other side of the ball, so like Alvin Kamara last week after Chris Olave kind of suffered that really serious concussion early in the first quarter, Kamara saw 38 opportunities. That is absolutely absurd. So if Olave's out again this week, which I suspect he will be, that wide receiver pool is going to be really thin for the Saints. And so, Kamara, I think he had 25 DK points when these teams met back in week 4. And that was a game that Shaheed and Olave were both healthy. So I think he's likely to make my really short list of running backs on this 10-game slate. Finally, Taysom Hill saw 10 opportunities last week, scored a touchdown. So, I think he's likely to be heavily involved with Kamara, especially if Olave misses, which is looking likely, and he's only 4K. So that's probably where my initial interest is in that game. So the next game is the 49ers at the Bucs. And it's kind of hard to tell this early in the week how much my interest will be in Brock Purdy here. It does kind of stand out on paper, but there's some big injury news around Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Juwan Jennings. So I think that if 2 of those 3 are both active, I think this is going to set up a really strong spot for the 49ers. The Bucs are going to definitely be shorthanded, likely without Godwin and Evans. They're playing on a short week. And so the 49ers did activate Christian McCaffrey. He's practicing yesterday. I believe he's practicing again today. I expect him to be eased in, so his salary is $8K. I don't know that I'm going to get there on him. But if Deebo Samuel is active, I think both him and George Kittle are in really strong spots. Same with rookie wide receiver Ricky Pearsall at mid 4Ks here, especially if Juwan Jennings is to miss again. On the other side of the ball, Cade Otton's been peppered with targets since the injuries to Evans and Godwin. I think he's likely to see probably 8 to 12 targets again in this matchup. Just kind of where else are the targets going to flow? So I do like him. He would probably be on my early list of initial consideration. So the next game here, another 1 p.m. start, is the Steelers at the Commanders. Starting at the running back position here, you've got Najee Harris, 6,200. He's seen 16 or more opportunities in every game this season, with 75% of his games being 19 or more opportunities. So, in the past 6 weeks, the Commanders have allowed James Conner, Derrick Henry, and DeAndre Swift all to rush for over 100 yards. All 3 of them scored a touchdown. So I would expect the touches to be there once again for Najee Harris. He's initially, stands out to me here in the low 6Ks. Through the air, and on the ground as well. This is a tough matchup for Jaden Daniels. The Steelers have held every quarterback below their season average for rushing. I think they've given up just over 50 yards rushing to the position combined through all 8 weeks. And they face some mobile quarterbacks in, Bo Nix, Richardson, Dak, Herbert, and Daniel Jones. So, the ground matchup doesn't really stand out at all for Washington. I think Tyrone Tracy's the only running back to go for over 88 yards against Pittsburgh. And the Steelers have faced Bijan Robinson, J.K. Dobbins, Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor. So they faced some strong backs and haven't really given up strong games. So none of those spots for Brian Robinson or Austin Eckler really stand out to me. Through the air, it's kind of a middling matchup here for both teams. Terry McLaurin's been uber consistent. He's, really continued developing his chemistry with Jaden Daniels. However, he's yet to exceed 23 fantasy points, and that's despite having multiple games with 2 touchdowns. So I feel like it's going to be really hard for him to get there. He's expensive, over 7K. On the other side of the ball, George Pickens doesn't really stand out, but, he's shown 35-point upside last season. And the Commanders have already allowed, multiple explosive games this year, 10 for 127 and a touchdown to Malik Neighbors, 6 for 118 and 2 touchdowns to Jamar Chase, 9 for 132 to Zay Flowers. So I think that's going to keep George Pickens kind of in the conversation for me early. For me, I kind of try to build out my initial player pool and then kind of shrink it down. So he's a guy that will likely make my initial pool here, and then we'll kind of see how things shake out as the week evolves. Some guys will open up. There'll be some value that opens up that you're not seeing initially here on Tuesday morning. But that's kind of how I like to do it. So, the next game on the app here is the Titans at the Chargers. So, since the Chargers week 5 bye, Justin Herbert's averaging 33 pass attempts, which compared to 22 pass attempts his first 4 weeks of the season is kind of a stark change of how they are approaching games. Herbert's averaging 287 passing yards during that 4-game stretch. And, he's got his full complement of weapons now healthy, and he's only 5,200. So kind of initially, to me, this stands out as an interesting, intriguing spot, and one that I feel like the field is going to shy away from, just because the Titans, they're a tough matchup on paper, but, I think you have to consider who they've played. They faced Caleb Williams making his NFL debut, Malik Willis, Tyler Huntley, Joe Flacco, Drake May, Jared Goff, Aaron Rodgers, and then, Josh Allen. So not exactly a murderer's row of quarterbacks. So I do have some initial interest in Josh Herbert, in Herbert this week. And I think that if you're going to stack Herbert, I think Quentin Johnson and Ladd McConkey are probably my favorite options there. On the ground, kind of a difficult matchup for both teams. J.K. Dobbins has had a strong season, a guy I was really high on in best ball, but kind of no interest in him here. He's expensive, and the Titans have been really stout against the run. Outside of Jahmyr Gibbs, who broke a 70-yard touchdown run, no other running back has exceeded 62 rushing yards against the Titans. So probably not a spot I've got interested in Dobbins. On the other side of the ball, Tony Pollard has seen a tremendous workload, 20 touches in each of the past 5 games. But only one running back has exceeded 70 rushing yards against the Chargers, and they've only surrendered 1 touchdown to running backs all season. So it's kind of hard to get to Pollard for me. He's close to 7K in salary, and I just think that there are better options. We've spoken about several better options already. So probably not of initial interest to me here. Moving on to the Jets at the Cardinals. So this should be a really good spot for Aaron Rodgers. He's coming off that great 4th quarter comeback against the Texans on Thursday Night Football. And the Cardinals have already allowed both Josh Allen and Jordan Love to account for 4 touchdown games against them this season. So the upside is there for Rodgers. He's only 5,700. And his stacking partners are really obvious and straightforward with Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams. Both saw double-digit targets last week. The matchup is above average for Breece Hall as well. I think he's intriguing. On the other side of the ball, the Jets are like really tough matchups for wide receivers. Tank Dell and George Pickens did both eclipse 100 yards, but I think they're the only ones with strong games against the Jets from a wide receiver perspective. So probably no interest in the Cardinals pass catchers. James Conner, kind of initially interesting to me here. Every opposing running back that saw at least 19 touches either eclipsed 100 total yards or scored multiple touchdowns against the Jets. And so I feel like this is a spot where Connor is likely to kind of see on the higher end of his touches, as I don't suspect the Cards to have a ton of success through the air. So Connor kind of priced there in that mid 6K range at 6,500. I think he's initially interesting to me. And then the last game of the slate here is the Eagles at the Cowboys. And I think my interest in this game is going to widely, hinge on injury news. We had all of like AJ Brown, Dak Prescott, and CeeDee Lamb all exited Sunday's games with injuries. Looks like Dak Prescott is going to miss some extended time, to be determined with AJ Brown and CeeDee Lamb. So kind of have to take a wait and see on them this early in the week. Best matchup in this game, probably on the slate overall, and kind of somewhat unaffected by those injuries, is Saquon Barkley. He's averaging close to 23 opportunities a game all season. He gets a depleted Dallas defense here that's already allowed monster games of 180 yards and 4 touchdowns to Alvin Kamara, 172 yards and 2 touchdowns to Derrick Henry, 102 and a touchdown to Isaac Arendo, 145 to Bijan Robinson, and then 171 and 2 touchdowns to the combination of Gibbs and Montgomery. I do expect Barkley to touch the ball 20 to 25 times here. If AJ Brown is active, I'll certainly have interest in him and Jalen Hurts as well. For Dallas, with Dak likely already out, missing probably multiple weeks, early reports. If Lamb is unable to go, I think the Eagles defense, probably paired with Barkley, will probably be some of the highest owned plays on the slate, but they really stand out. Kind of hopping over to defense here, kind of starting here at the expensive end, working my way down. I usually like to try to identify 5 to 6 defenses that kind of stand out. Here on the pay up side, the Chargers, the Vikings, and the Eagles all kind of stand out to me. Kind of looking here at the mid-range, kind of around a 3K, maybe a little higher, a little less. The Bears kind of stand out here, in a good spot. And then as a pay down option, man, not really a lot to like here. I do think that the Broncos are one of the better defenses in the league. So with them kind of down here almost at min salary, I will say that I think that they are initially interesting as well. So then if I'm going to kind of build out, a little bit of a player pool, I will open up here the Bink machine and just kind of select. Let's look at quarterbacks. And I think of guys that we initially liked. We liked Josh Allen. Had some initial interest in Kirk Cousins. Unable to add. Oh, can't just let me lock them. So let's just go like 25% interest and whatever, 50 doesn't really matter. Kirk Cousins, 25 to 50. Who else we liked? Brock Purdy here. Get him in at 25 to 50. Obviously, these percentages can't really stay, but just kind of trying to identify who I do like. We liked Sam Darnold here. We liked Drake May, kind of stood out as some initial interest. And we liked Justin Herbert, had some initial interest. And I think Aaron Rodgers, we had some initial interest. So let us see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 quarterbacks of initial interest. Obviously, that would be more than I would really want to consider as part of my pool. We'll kind of narrow that down as the week goes on. Moving over to running back, Saquon Barkley. Definitely some initial interest in Saquon Barkley. Just typing in some random percentages here. Alvin Kamara really stands out as well. Let's see. McCaffrey, no. Jonathan Taylor, I think probably interesting as well from our slate review. James Conner stood out. These percentages don't mean anything. I'm just kind of typing in to kind of get some of these guys exposure here. Kind of the same with Najee Harris. And was there anyone else on the pool that I liked this week? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Who am I missing? I've got Barkley, Kamara, Swift, Najee. I think that's it. Oh, James Conner. He's like 6,500, I think. Yep, 6,500. So let's get him in there as well. Wide receiver is going to be a little bit of a wider range kind of here to start. Justin Jefferson, do like Jefferson this week a lot. I think that's a really great spot. A.J. Brown, we'll wait and see on some news there. Garrett Wilson, definitely of interest, certainly with kind of the same with Devontae Adams, since we're considering Rodgers this week. Let's throw in Deebo Samuel here. He's got some injury news as well. George Pickens, a guy that we will consider in some builds. Obviously, these percentages don't mean anything. London's got that injury, but let's keep him in the pool early on as well. Same with Darnell Mooney. All guys that we kind of talked about as we were kind of talking through rosters. Josh Downs we'll pencil in here as we get more news, kind of waiting to see the starting quarterback situation. Going through Ladd McConkey, get some exposure to Ladd McConkey here. Amari Cooper to go along with Josh Allen, just of guys with potential interest. Obviously, have to wait on some injury news there. DeAndre Hopkins, a guy I think is going to be pretty popular after last night's performance. Kind of going through who else did we like? Quentin Johnson, we kind of identified as some interest kind of to pair with Justin Herbert. Ricky Pearsall, I think, kind of stands out as well. Just kind of waiting on some more injury news there, depending on if they've got a full complement. I don't, my interest in him might wane as well. No real other interest here. Parker Washington, definitely interested, as I'm going to be high on Sam Darnold this week. It's a good bring back. And I think that we kind of captured all the guys that we talked about there at wide receiver. It's always going to be the biggest net. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. About 15 or so kind of on the first pass. At tight end, let's scroll up. Kelsey, not really of interest. George Kittle, yeah, some interest there with George Kittle for sure. Trey McBride, I think, he's kind of on the borderline. Certainly, if I'm going to build Aaron Rodgers stacks, I would mix him in there as well. Cade Otton, yep, interest in Cade Otton as well. These percentages are just so random. Evan Ingram, definitely have interest in him as well this week. Ferguson, no. Kincaid, yeah, interest there as well to kind of go along with Josh Allen. Hawkinson, yep, we do like him kind of to pair with Darnold. Again, these percentages really don't mean anything. Taysom Hill down here. Have some interest in Taysom Hill. We have some interest in Hunter Henry here to go along with Drake May. I think we've probably got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So a little bit bigger of a pool than normal initially with tight end. But don't mind that kind of early on. And then at defense, I think there were like 4 or 5 that we identified as guys that I liked. The Eagles here to go along with the Chargers and the Vikings, kind of in that mid-range, right around 3K. The Bears, and then kind of paying all the way down the Broncos as well. So if we look here at the whole pool, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That gets us to right around 40 total players. So on a 10-game slate like we have this week, generally looking at like quarterback, running back, 2 wide receivers, tight end, and defense. So kind of 6, we'll call them viable players on average on every team. 20 teams on the slate. So kind of 120 players that we would deem as or on my first pass that I would deem as kind of viable. This first look, I've identified 40, so that's kind of a third of the pool. It's probably way more than I want. So we'll probably work to kind of condense this down to somewhere around 30 players likely across 150 builds, across 150 rosters. And just kind of the point being, you can't roster everyone. You'll hear people all the time that, we'll play 50% of the players in the pool, and we'll just frequently say, hey, I had all the right guys. I just didn't get the right combination. Well, of course you did. You were playing half of the players in the pool, on the slate. So to me, it's really more about kind of tightening down a player pool. And I don't do that on Tuesday. Obviously, this was just a quick first look. But that's kind of my process. And as the week goes on, as we get more information, sometimes I'll add guys to the pool as value kind of opens up, fiddle with the allocations and things like that. So that's kind of how I do things from my Tuesday first look, kind of get an idea of who's standing out this week. And as the week evolves, so will my thoughts. But thank you for tuning in this week. I hope you don't mind looking at a first look. And I hope to see you and your OWS avatar at the top of the leaderboard here in week 10. Thanks again.